Serious, retired soldiers on Reddit. What was something that you saw or experienced that you never shared with anyone? Not what I know you are looking for, but here it goes. I was never the popular kid in high school and got picked on a lot throughout my entire K-12 education. I joined up at 17 to get away from home and start earning my own money. I also got picked on a lot in basic. Soldiers spend more time fighting each other than the enemy. It's not that way for everyone, but enough so that it's sad. Anyways, I wasn't the lowest on the rung in basic. Luckily, it was another guy in his early 20s. He was a nerd like me, but he also messed up and failed ALET. Your typical Gomer pile. I won't list all his infractions as I can't remember them all. But one night we were out in the field doing training. It was like 5-6 weeks in and we were doing land nav. My firewatch had just ended, so I headed to the only porta john in our area to relieve myself before racking out again. I get there and the door is locked, so I knock and ask how long they were going to be. He asked, "Dr. Sick, is that you?" It was Gomer pile, of course. "Yeah man, hurry up, I've got to go." I can't, man, the guy before me had on the seat, and I couldn't see, and I sat in it. Freaking Gomer pile. Okay man. Just stay there. Where was he going to go? He'll be back with some baby wipes and hand sanitizer. Could you bring me my spare uniform too? I think I got some on it. Sure man. I never told any of the other guys about it. His life was hard enough and I'm no longer in contact with them, so there's no way for this to get back to the guy. I can't even remember his name anymore. TLDR. Fellow soldiers sat in it. I helped him out. Posting this on a throwaway account. Long story short, killed an entire family during the Vietnam War without showing a single emotion. We were insensitive to even the most gut-churning things you could ever imagine. A father, mother, and 2 daughters died. Our commander didn't give a shit if it had been nothing but school children in that house. Everyone had to die. They were accused of harboring weapons for the Viet Cong. I have nightmares every night. In the first Gulf War, me and some guys were clearing bunkers. We went down into one and there were pin-ups of Madonna. It was weird. I served in the military here in Finland, as required by law, and there was this guy who chain smoked a lot and we called him Skorsten, Swedish for chimney. His father had killed his mom and then hung himself while Skorsten was young. Skorsten was always depressed, but he got along and we were good friends. Then 5 years after we got out, I get a message from an army friend who says that Skorsten had hung himself because his girlfriend had left him for another guy. I've accepted that there was nothing I could have done, but it still haunts me. Sometimes when I go out for a smoke, I still remember how he would ask me for a cigarette because he had misplaced his own. So I'll light a cigarette for him and place it on the side of the ashtray. That's my way to remember him. Edit. A big thanks to all who replied. You made my day. Hell, you made my week. Using a throwaway because I've never told anyone before and I don't think I ever could. On a motorcade patrol in Afghanistan, our point vehicle struck an IED. My best friend was thrown about 10 yards from the wreckage and impaled through the chest with a piece of metal. His face was blown half off. I'll never forget it. I recognized half of his face and the other half was charred bone. He died in my arms. About 2 years later, I finally got stateside and went to see his family. They told me he wrote to them every day, and when the letters stopped coming, they knew he was gone. His 5-year-old daughter asked me how her daddy died. I didn't know what to say. I still have nightmares about pointing my weapon at little kids. I'm terrified to have kids because of it. There was a dead Iraqi guy on the ground halfway covered with a blanket. After we shot him, I saw a pack of smokes in his shirt pocket and I remember reaching in there and taking them so I could hand them out to the guys. I even gave some to the other Iraqi prisoners we were watching at the time. It was one of the weird moments. Thinking about it, how strange would it be if your dead body was laying there and some guy came out and took your pack of smokes out of your shirt pocket? That morning, like most mornings, you put your smokes in your jacket and go out to face the day. You die and then some guy from another country casually takes them from you as you rot in the sun. Weird. Sometimes I wonder about the stories my maternal grandfather, who was drafted at age 17 into the Nazi army, must have. They sent him to Stalingrad. All I know is that they told him to take the rifle of the guy he was following should he die and that his shoes were too small. costing him 2 toes. He was imprisoned in a Siberian mine and says he only survived because elder prisoners fed him, saying at least the kids should be able to one day go home. When he did finally return after 5 years, his own mother didn't recognize him at the door for all the weight he had lost. My little brother once asked him if he had killed anyone. He cried at the dinner table. I haven't had the guts to ask him about the war. He's still alive, aged 86 now, and I love him dearly. One of my best buds got drunk and fell off the barracks. They labeled it an accident. It was actually a suicide over a girl. I know, not too interesting, but I thought I'd share. Never told anyone. Always felt guilty. My very first patient in Afghanistan was a 10-month girl. The father brought her to our gate asking for help. We checked her out and she is literally missing all of the skin from shoulder blade to waist on her back left side. Burned to the bone. Dad tells Terp that she tripped and got cut up by gravel. Clearly she is burned. I can smell it still today. I can remember the screech she made. The charred skin I had to remove. And that arsehole just sat in the corner. Nothing I can do to right the situation other than do what I can for her. That single moment definitely set the tempo for the following 9 months. If anyone is looking to read more of these, I suggest the book The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. He basically has said if he didn't write those experiences down he probably would have killed himself. The feeling of not feeling anything after killing someone is crazy. It's not like you're stone cold, no emotion. But think of it as you're a waiter at a restaurant and you serve your customers. You don't think anything of it when it's happening. You just do and carry on. It doesn't hit you until later and you're like, mother ducker, I just did that. The emotion of everything is so bland when it happens but so raw when you take a step back. Whenever you have a buddy that gets killed, yeah, it's scary but it doesn't hit you until later. Every moment in that person's life had led up to that moment. It's concluded. Over. Done. Every first kiss. Every Friday night football game. Every person they ever had any contact or relationship with. Everything they ever said. Every plan they ever had or memory they had created came to a conclusion in a single moment that ended their entire existence. TLDR, life is precious. Don't take it for granted. I guess I never really tell anyone anything unless they were directly involved. I'll try to keep them short and sweet. My engineer unit was tasked with clearing a road that had been black status for 7 years. Midway in we get ambushed by a whole village on both sides. We nearly ran out of cruiser ammo that day. What really gets me about it is that just minutes before it all went down, a mother and her child ran to safety in a nearby building. And to my recollection there wasn't a single building we didn't hit with either Mark 19 or Polish strikers. We tore that village to pieces when it was over. It doesn't really bother me, but I do wonder how much more harm we did than good. On a lighter note, in basic training one of my battles was really chafing on his ass. He couldn't quite get the baby powder in his crack. He must have really trusted me because he asked me very discreetly and I obliged. So there I am, shooting baby powder into another guy's ass. I took part in 78 separate attacks from hostile forces around Mosul in 2005. Lots of bad it, but the one thing I near share is that one time I was in the turret of an M1114 HMMWV behind a M2.50 machine gun doing convoy security, and I looked in a vehicle as we cruised by and there was a little girl, probably 8, who had a healed up gunshot wound to the face. She was missing an eye. She was smiling broadly at me and waved at me emphatically. I just waved back. That little girl had the weight of the world on her shoulders and was smiling. I've never had a bad day since. There was also a kid that was cut deep to where his thumb was barely hanging onto his hand. I was in the turret again that day and the kid ran alongside the truck making a wrapping motion with his hand. I tried to get my first aid pouch open so I could throw him my sterile bandage to wrap up his hand, but the old button, Vietnam era piece of it, wouldn't come unsnapped. The little dude ran next to us for about a minute while I ducked with it. Finally I just slipped the Alice clips, tugged it off my vest and tossed the whole thing to him. He was smiling the whole time too and was very happy for the packet. It's like Duck Man. We really ducked it up over there. Why couldn't we have done more really good stuff instead of escorting Commander Douchebag and the whole ducking PR team to a school just so they could get some ducking photo ops with the poor kids to put in the newspaper back home? My father now suffers from war-caused PTSD, but the most memorable thing he told me from war were the children who would beg for candy outside the base camp every day. Him and his friends would play with them over the few months he was there. One day he returned to the children slaughtered and decapitated outside the base. Edit. Spelling. I'll share a more funny thing that happened to me, I guess. My first night watch in a very remote patrol base in Afghanistan. I go up to one of the towers to check the other soldier is actually manning it. Sit down with the fellow while I try and communicate a bit with him. Rookie mistake. He takes a bit of a liking to me, I guess. I sit down next to him to show him the thermal night scope I'm using. He starts patting my thigh, nodding and smiling at me. I recall all the man love Thursday things I got told by senior soldiers and quickly bailed down the ladder and avoided that tower for the rest of my watch. Lol. Afghanis love a bit of a padabam and I probably looked like a good little chai boy at the time as I was only about 22. Lol. Edit. Typos. Edit. Also, I never told the other guys in the base cause I knew I'd get nicknamed chai boy or something, haha. Okay. Halfway through the thread and I can't now empathize with the fact so many soldiers having PTSD. Or worse yet, the multiple suicides. Just, thanks guys for telling us uniformed public about some of this bandit. I think these are the most patriotic MF ever. The first time I heard the incoming alarm, day 1 of deployment into Iraq, I was in a Puerto Rico. I'm a devout atheist, not sure if that's how you say it, but all I could say was no god. Not like this. Don't let it end with me taking a writ in a backwater country. Not with my pants down. I know it's not exciting but I'm still not proud of it. Convoy was stopped in some dirt village. Sun was starting to go down, all the kids and females went into the building about 15 yards to my left. Bunch of pickups came into the village full of military age males who then went into the fields, pulled up long boxes and broke into groups, then scattered around various covers and buildings with said boxes. Gee, I wonder what is about to happen. Man, I'm glad the rules of engagement won't let us do jack it about this. Just as the sun goes down, lo and behold, an ambush from the west with rockets and RPK fire. Gunner is pointed west, to the right, and doing what gunners do at times like this. As the sun sets and twilight turns to dark, full on Star Wars mode is engaged, tracers everywhere. The first component attacked when the sun touched the ground from the west, second wave hit us from the east when the sun disappeared. Guy came out of the building to my left where the rocket kicked open the truck door and put my optics on the guy's chest to see a kid's face, completely terrified kid's face. Don't know if I shot. I know the fire support with a 30mm chain gun did. It blew them away in 4x zoom along with the small building they came out of. An early morning salvo of 3 rockets blew a tent near my hut to bits while I was in Afghanistan. I ran over to the HESCO bunker in my sleep. After I had come to a little bit, I was checking what I had with me. This is the part that I've never really shared with anyone else. But I didn't notice for a minute. I only had on my combat shirt, Kevlar, and weapon, and then was completely nude from the waist down. And number 3232. And number 3232. I was porky pigging it while it was blowing up around us. It's all I could think about. I felt really awkward about it. Even though I've seen and been seen naked by everyone there. I think I just really didn't want to be caught up in a fight without pants. It was racing through my mind. If there's a perimeter breach, I need to get to my Foot Locker first and get some pants on. I was rehearsing it in my mind. Haha. Luckily the laundry tent took the brunt of the attack, but that really put us back on clean clothes for a bit. During phase 2 training I walked in on a mate wanking. He didn't stop. What he did do was ejaculate all over his own face. Of all the things I've seen, that sticks with me the most. I felt ashamed even witnessing it. My grandfather told me about the time he served in the British RAF during World War II. He was a navigator on a Lancaster bomber and did a lot of nighttime raids against German factories. He was returning one night from a mission when he ran into some friendly ACAC, anti-aircraft fire, and crashed into an English farmer's field. He ended up in an Air Force hospital with broken bones for several months. His crew were unscathed in the accident and were assigned to notoriously dangerous pilot who kept losing his crew on previous missions. They unfortunately didn't survive the next mission, and Granddad had some serious post-war survivors guilt because of it. He only really talked about it just before he died. I could tell he felt somehow responsible for their fate. But there was a silver lining to this story. My grandmother-to-be was working for the Royal Observer Corps in an early warning radar station at the time. She was partially responsible for directing the Ack battery that accidentally shot him down. Having heard about the friendly fire incident, she took upon herself to visit him in hospital, a different kind of guilt. They hit it off and ended up getting married after the war. TL. Dr. Grandma shot Grandpa down. Turns out it's a valid pickup strategy. Dude shot a 12-14-year-old cause he opened fire on us. My great uncle was in Vietnam. The only thing he ever mentioned was seeing a tiger. The tiger was fleeing a forest that had been engulfed in flames. He said the tiger was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. I was stuck in a special circle of hell during Vietnam known as a fire base. We had a lot of near overruns and all sorta crazy had happened, but one thing always bothered me. Mortar pits would run into rounds that didn't go out after they hung. So we had deep ditches next to the pits to clear a hot round that hung. Guys get lazy and a lot of dead brass, 105 cans and other detritus of war got tossed in the pits. Local kids used to hop in the pits if we didn't chase them off to scrap brass and dead heads to make booby traps. I saw a kid run up and jump feet first into a pit. His body went below the sandbags and instantly it was like the sun crashed into my face, then I was deaf. I looked up seconds later and his arm was on top of our APC. I remember at the time my only feeling was at least that shell didn't become a booby trap. Edit. Duck my grammar hard enough to type this without worrying about commas. I saw one of my good friends who was going through an awful domestic issue to be divorced in Iraq strangle a cat just to cope with the issue. He was a nice family guy at one point, and eventually returned to that. He ended up going to jail when he got back because he tried to pull the gun out of an officer's holster. I should have checked him into the psych ward days before that happened. A bit late to the party, but what the hell, why not? I was sitting in the driver's seat of my Bradley at a traffic control point outside of Baghdad in 2003. I was bored, hot and hungry. Along comes this kid. He's about 12. In one hand he's got a toy robot and in the other a carton of cigarettes. He comes towards me yelling "Meester, Meester," running low on cigarettes as I was. I dropped down inside my driver's hole to grab my wallet cause $5 for a carton of smokes is a great price. As I'm rooting around inside the Bradley there's an earth-shattering boom and the Bradley rocked. I stick my head out and when the dust cleared there was a pair of shoes with feet still in them. I cleared my head and climbed out to check for damage and found a huge blood splatter on the side of the vehicle. As I stood there, looking at the remains of a preteen suicide bomber, the only thought that went through my head was disappointment at the loss of those cigarettes. It's very interesting how much of your humanity is lost during times of war. I'm not a soldier, but my father served 2 tours. He told me I'm the only person he ever told this to. He's a helicopter mechanic. Him and his company often did something the military calls Air Force checks. When they didn't completely understand the manual, it's when you go to one helicopter, see how it's set up, then compare it to another helicopter and see if everything matches up. One day the chopper him and his crew were in charge of, something malfunctioned, and they crashed, and they all died. He said it will always haunt him that he didn't double check the aircraft, that he didn't do something that could save those young men's lives. There was no enemy, no fire, no explosion. Something just malfunctioned and they crashed and died. He only ever brought it up once when we were taking a walk together, and has never spoken of it since. I don't blame him. I have to use a throwaway, because I'm disgusted with myself. I pray to God every day that my family never finds out what I did. On patrol in Baghdad, my partner and I encountered a group of men beating a woman in the street. At the time there were many riots breaking out, and we were instructed by our CO not to intervene unless there was a clear and present danger to ourselves. We walked away. I'll never forget her screams. They were pouring scalding water on her face. I wanted to kill them all, but I couldn't. Her skin was coming off. I still see it in my dreams. I've only told my wife, my therapist, and my mother what happened. I'm lucky I had someone there to save my life, but I resent him sometimes. I'm highly medicated for severe depression and anxiety disorder. I have no friends, no job, and some days find it hard to even get out of bed. I might leave the house once a week if I'm lucky. I can't enjoy the 4th of July or New Year's. I feel like I'm less of a human being because of what happened. I know other people cope with it better. I don't, and I hate myself that I can't cope better and be normal. Unfortunately, I feel like my family is paying the price. My respect to all of you have been through a traumatic experiences and are moving along with life. I'm trying every day and will keep trying. Because I don't have an option. This is actually a great thread because this is a question which you should never ask face to face, but sometimes the best way to cope with an experience is to share it, and here on Reddit you can do just that. Suicide bomber blew himself up in a crowded restaurant. 40 people dead instantly. 150 wounded. Due to the fact that it was a civilian matter, we were ordered to let the Iraqis deal with it. They had no ability to in the slightest, and we watched as they bled to death of simple injuries. Capital I. I remember a child watching me from about 20 feet away as he bled out. I saw a father cradling his son who had taken the full force of the blast and was nothing more than a leaking sack of charred meat. Worse, I saw Iraqis just not care. I lost my faith in that war right there. Had a father bring his kid in who had got caught in crossfire. He brought his pillows, his blankets, everything to make him comfortable. We got him off the helicopter and just knew he wasn't going to make it. Bring him to the FST, work on him, he's not coming back. I look over and he just staring at us sobbing. Huge gasping sobs. You don't need to speak a different language to completely see absolute heartache and pain. I'm not a father, but that ducked me up a bit. No one should have to bury their children. Not a soldier but a sailor, and I happened to be in Hong Kong Christmas Eve when that tsunami hit Indonesia. We got there in a few days, I think 4. Anyways, the ocean would usually be flat, but it was covered in wrapped Christmas presents and trees and houses. The worst part was the bodies had bloated to at least double the size. Sorry it's short, but I'm hammered on an iPhone with one eye open. Made a throwaway for this. I've never been able to tell my loved ones about this. Sometimes you want to spare them the knowledge of just how much darkness there is inside of you. I'm not sure how I feel about telling complete strangers either. But it's been burning a hole inside of me for some time now. I made the mistake of falling in love with a fellow Marine. We kept it a secret, of course. For professional reasons. We deployed together. And still, no one knew. We never touched each other, made eyes at each other, or ever did anything that would be inappropriate during the deployment, which was torture in and of itself. A few months into the deployment, we were passing out food, candy, and other supplies to a village. It was part of the whole hearts and minds thing. A little girl walked up to get some candy from the man I was in love with. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was holding a doll that someone had given her, with an IED sewn into it. As soon as she took the candy from his hand, the IED detonated. It blew both of them apart instantly. Injured 3 other people. I couldn't scream. I couldn't cry. I just remember watching it happen. I don't even remember hearing anything. I think the worst part was picking up the pieces of him afterward. Picking up his arms that had held me but were now in shreds. I don't even know how to describe what it felt like. It's so cliche registered sign to say, but a big piece of me died that day. I learned a type of fear that I did not know existed. October 2011, Kandahar City Battle of CNS. My Freon board came under sustained enemy fire using RPGs and heavy machine guns. I was sleeping when the attack first began and remember hearing a loud noise that suddenly woke me up. What had happened was a RPG had hit the top of the T-wall I was sleeping at and tumbled to the 3rd tent down. That tent was where all the local nationals we used as interpreters lived. I could hear screaming. It's a sound I will never forget. I remember running over there with a couple of other soldiers and the scene was bad. Inside the tent there was blood everywhere. You could see where shrapnel had just shredded everything. One young local Terp was dead. The round had come through the top of the tent, had exploded right on his bunk. It was just horrible, man. I was a 24-year-old Navy petty officer, somewhere in Southeast Asia with a soon-to-retire RMM CPO who confessed that after 25 years he had no life to go home to. I was out 2 years later.